This video is brought to you by BTI Institute, a New Jersey leader in certification-based management training.
I'm in full screen mode, so I'm not going to be able to see anything on the chat. So if you want to get my attention, just say hi, hey Bob, or hey Nitin. That would be great. And so with that, let's do a few introductions. Myself, I've been working with Agile teams for probably close to 15 years now, and I have the I would never envision that I'd have the alphabet soup of certifications, but I do. It's something that I really enjoy. I enjoy learning and I enjoy working with teams. And I have to also say that anything that I say does not reflect the views of the Federal Reserve Board or the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. And with that, I'll let Nitin introduce himself.
Thanks, Bob. So my name is Nitin Khanna. Just like Bob, I've got an acronym of letters behind my name. I'm a constant learner. And I work with many Scrum teams, some who have thrived and excelled, and some that I've just seen tank with time. You might notice we're two names that are palindromes, one philosophy. We know this works, and we hope you enjoy the hour ahead.
Okay, so why are we here? John did a great job of introducing the topic to us. And what's been happening is more and more organizations are starting to see the value of agility. And so now the question is, how do you go about embracing it? And so pretty much, and as John did mention, that this topic has come up at prior Agile discussion group sessions. And when it comes to like a Scrum Master and we have an Agile coach, like what are the differences? Like if you walk onto a team and you're a member of the team and an Agile coach shows up, like what do they actually do? So hopefully at the end of the session, you'll have a better feeling for that. And you also might have a better idea as far as what a Scrum Master would do. And so basically the distinction is somewhat fuzzy. And as you'll see, as we're going through this presentation, that it's pretty much a Scrum Master does do coaching. You'll see that in the presentation, but there's sometimes an organization would bring in an external coach as well. So you might have both people, a Scrum Master and an Agile coach working with you. And so we're also going to get into does one size fit all, as far as with an Agile coach. Like, can you just open up the phone book and say, okay, I want to look up an Agile coach and I want to bring one in. And hopefully you'll see that, that's really not the type of answer. And we're also going to help you pick an Agile coach for your organization. And so where do we go from here? All right, so this comes from the Agile Coaching Institute, and it's a very great high-level view where the outer circle is the organization. And then in the inner circle, like anybody in PMI, I'm sure you're very familiar with, program management. So you'd have a program that would support an initiative as far as what the business wants to, what value does the business want? And then you have teams, and then you have individuals. And so now, looking at this here, you would say an Agile team facilitator, which is also known as a Scrum Master, they would actually be focusing on the individual and the team. And now the Agile coach, they might come in and they might be assigned to working with multiple teams, where they might help provide training, they might help provide Scrum Master training, they might help provide team training. If the organization wants to get into continuous integration, those type of technologies, they might hire a coach with those types of skills. And then outside of that, at the organizational level, you also have what they call an enterprise coach, where basically they'd be working with the executives in the organization where the business, like a lot of times, the buzzword is like, we're going to do an Agile transformation. And so that's when an organization would actually go out and hire some enterprise coaches that actually help in that and actually provide that level of organization. And then these coaches would talk to the Agile coaches at the program level, who would then talk to the Scrum Masters and the individual teams. And so that's pretty much how everything kind of all flows together. And so now this is something that when I went to a coaching boot camp in Boston, Lisa Atkins has this blue painter's tape and it was on the floor. And pretty much if you've ever come by the Agile LCI booth at one of the PMI conferences, I've had this set up this way as well. And it's a really interesting way to actually look at the different stances. So initially, anybody that wants to work in this space or be a Scrum Master or a coach, you have to be an Agile lean practitioner. And pretty much what that means is you really have to understand what Agile is, and you have to understand what Lean is, because if you're not an expert in any of those two, you can't possibly be a facilitator for any of the Agile events. And so then what you're going to be seeing here in this group here that's kind of being squeezed by the X's here, you're going to see the different skills that a coach will have. And so the first thing we're going to talk about is facilitation. And so pretty much when a Scrum Master, gets trained, and actually we just had a CSM CLB class last week, so we have some brand new Scrum Masters. And so if somebody can mute that person, that'd be great, thank you. And so pretty much your job would be a facilitator. Your job would be to facilitate the events that Scrum represents. So now looking at Scrum, and again, this is not meant to give you a very, detailed view of Scrum, but just as a refresher, Scrum has 3 roles. We've talked about this before. You have a product owner, the team, and the Scrum Master. That's the only roles that Scrum recognizes. And then there's 5 events. And one would be sprint planning. The next would be the daily Scrum or the daily stand-up meeting, sprint review, the sprint retrospective, and then the Scrum itself is considered an event. And so now when we're talking about facilitation, the Scrum Master or the coach would facilitate these events. And now, you just can't schedule a meeting and say, okay, we're going to do sprint planning. You have to really understand what the purpose of sprint planning is. And you also have to understand why the team is there and what you're trying to accomplish. And that's what you want from a facilitator. And that's why they really need to be an Agile Lean practitioner. They need to have those skills. And then also part of Scrum is there's 3 artifacts. The first is the backlog. The second one is the sprint backlog. And the last one is actually the finished work. Is this something that could be put into production? It doesn't have to actually go into production at the end of the sprint, but it's ready to go into production. That means it's fully tested, and the product owner would say, hey, we're going to put this in production now. And so now the 2 backlogs, the one is what the product owner, the overall vision for what the product owner wants to deliver, as far as what, it might take 10, 20, 50 sprints worth of work for the product owner to meet the individual vision. And then the sprint backlog is what the team actually volunteers for and commits to in a 1 to 4 week duration. And so pretty much that's Scrum in a nutshell at a very high level. And what we're talking about now is these 5 events. And so now let's talk a little bit about the 3 roles where you have the product owner. Their job is to really focus on the team's purpose. The Scrum Master's his job is to protect the team autonomy, and the team itself is the one doing the work. And the Agile manager, because these people also exist, in an organization. Usually, you'd find these people as development managers. They might be release managers, the managers that have really worked a really long time to come up with these careers. They no longer have a job in Scrum, but pretty much their job is really now to facilitate mastery. And if you notice, if you're familiar with Dan Pink's work from Drive, where things that motivate individuals, it's basically having a purpose, having autonomy, and having mastery. Having autonomy means giving the employee the chance to actually manage themselves and basically make commitments to themselves and not being told what to do. And so these are the roles in Scrum. And now the reason I'm sharing this with you is now we're going to start looking at where would a coach fall in, where does a coach interact? Because if you look at this, there's no coach on this picture. If you look in the Scrum guide, there's no coach identified in the Scrum guide. So now to build on this further so we pretty much talked about the Scrum Master having facilitation. And now what happens with the coach is they bring in professional coaching. And that's basically where you help team members or help your product owner or help managers come up with their own solution. You don't actually tell them the solution. You're actually coaching them and helping them think through what their problem is and coming up with objectives or ways where they want to get that accomplished. A coach also brings in mentoring, where a person on the team, a perfect example, I've done a lot of this, where I've mentored Scrum Masters. All right, so pretty much you have a brand new Scrum Master, these people that just graduated from Michael James's class last week, they could be mentored, where basically they would come, the coach would work with them and actually help them, guide them through the whole process of becoming a really great Scrum Master through mentoring. And that's basically teaching the Scrum Master, having the Scrum Master try it, and then come back, talk about it, and answer a lot of whys, like why did this happen, or what could we done here, what could we done there. And then finally, there's teaching. And that's when the coach would put a hat on where they're actually a teacher, where they would actually provide training. Like if you're working with a brand new team that's never done Scrum before, a great thing to be might be teach a team about Scrum. Another thing to teach about might be teaching a team about lean. Like what is lean? What does it mean when you're lean? So these are all the skills that a coach would bring in. And so now bringing it all together, as you notice, the coach is kind of sitting on the outside, and their focus is actually on something else. Their focus is to look at the entire system, the people working together and figuring out, where could they help the most. So that's pretty much the difference is where a Scrum Master, they evolve into the coach, as far as picking up those additional skills of mentoring, coaching, and teaching. But when you first start out, they're a facilitator. Like a lot of people will look at a Scrum Master, you facilitate the different Scrum events, the 4 Scrum events. And so Nitin, did you want to take a try on this one here? So pretty much we have select members of a dev team are not meeting consistently for daily Scrum.
Right. So we came across a few scenarios, and some of these might be very common to you, and we want to break it down a little bit more, right? So if you were faced with this and you do a bit of a dance, if you go teaching and you say, hey, the purpose of this event or meeting is to blah, 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 blah. That's your teaching stance that you would do, right? If you were to take another stance, a Scrum Master might just say, hey, let's just huddle together and see why we have this, and let's see if we can explain these 3 questions. What we did yesterday, what's the plan for today? Are we meeting our vision? And do we have any roadblocks, amongst other things? Or you could do another dance and be a mentor and say, hey, what I noticed with another team was blah, 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 blah again. Now, a mentoring stance may or may not help the immediate and may or may not help your team, but it's a story, it's your experience, it's something that comes about, and you might be planting seeds along the way. And finally, professional coaching would take an open-ended question. So as an example, what does this team want to do when this happens? And this is actually weaving itself into some team norms and agreements, which get into the concept of being self-organized. So very interesting, when we have a question or a scenario that comes to us, we could approach it in different ways. And based on the earlier depictions we saw, here are some examples. Let's do another one, Bob.
Sure. So basically, to clarify about the coach, I'd see that the coach isn't given the answer. So like, why is that?
Open question to the audience, or people can chat that in.
That could be to the audience or to you, Nitin. Like, so, looking at, what, like, how do I describe this? A lot of organizations, when a coach comes in, sometimes they get a little bit mad at the coach because the coach, they just say they keep on asking questions. They don't give us any answers. I want answers. Give me answers. Tell me the answer. And their job, if you hire a coach, their job is not to give you the answer. And so
right,
that leads to my question, like, why would this be a question instead of giving an answer?
You're trying to teach the team to become autonomous and to learn to think for themselves and come up with these, plans of action amongst themselves. It's not the whole job of Agile is to not have somebody telling you what to do. It's for the team to be self-supporting and to figure it out. And
right, it's a question. Yep, someone else was saying something. Go ahead. Yep,
I
we're
think
also
it was
seeing
a
a
way
few
of
things in the chat.
promoting self-governance, finding the answers yourself, what works best for your team, rather than somebody external giving you direction as to how your team should be running.
Right. The self-governance, getting into self-organizing, the journey into awareness. Bob, go back one just for a moment to the earlier slide. I don't want to jump
Sure.
ahead. You're going forward.
Yeah.
So a coach does come from a place of curiosity. And the one thing we want to remember is when we, hey, that person's an agile coach walking around the floor or talking to people, we want to make this distinction. Where are they standing? What stance are they taking? And the coach, as Bob was alluding to, may not give you an answer, but that is intentional. It will churn up things and really help reflect what's going on. They do this by using powerful questions, exercises, and other things as well. So all good answers and feedback from the audience, including the chat. Let's look at another example and see how these map out there as well. So the product owner says, hey, the velocity is not going up, right? So Scrum Master might talk and just teach and say, the velocity is the outcome of something. It may or may not drive business value, right? That's the teaching stance. If we go to facilitating and say, hey, would you like me to facilitate a call, middle of the sprint or at sprint planning? Maybe here it leads to other conversations based on, capacity, time off, corporate holidays, teaching, past trends and history, getting into an empirical model, right? It's the collective intellect of people coming together. If we look at mentoring, again, hey, what I noticed with another team or another department was, and again, this is kind of normalizing a few things that we see with Agile and with Scrum. And finally, a coaching stance. What will an increase do for us? It's an open-ended question. It's not teaching anything. It's not correcting anybody. And that's where the coach will leave it. So again, we might have different stances that we take for a particular question or scenario. Let's see if we can do one with the audience, Bob. Do we have another
Sure.
example?
I think we do.
All righty. So how about we leave it to you? Here's a scenario. A dev member comes in and says, hey, I don't think we need a retrospective. Let's just cancel it, and not just for the next sprint closing, but throughout the year.
How many people heard that one, right?
Now, if you were to take a teaching stance, what might you do? Or how might you respond?
And that question's for the audience, if there's any brave people out there.
Might point out that the Scrum process requires a retrospective and that lessons learned are always good and can be even applied to the next sprint.
Good answer. Scrum does have rules, like you said, and the retrospective is certainly one event that is needed.
So I'll usually ask the question of why, and then they'll usually say it's a waste of time. I go, well, what would make it a waste of time? And basically by asking this and they keep going this, they're actually doing a retrospective by answering the questions. So it's kind of funny. And then eventually you get to an agreement of, okay, so if I can get this and that, and these are the things that you agree to, then we can have then you end up doing it. It's kind of funny.
Yeah,
Like
but that's
mental-
not teaching. That's more like, I guess, mentoring.
Okay.
Interesting. So yeah, certainly we could ask the why question, and we need to just figure out what stance that would be, right?
So, so for teaching, yeah, just pretty much what was said, you know, the purpose of the retrospective is, and pretty much to go and explain that. And what Seth, you were alluding to was something that comes from Lean, where you know, asking why 5 times, where you eventually will get to the right answer by asking it. All right, so then what's the next one for facilitating?
So again, it's the same scenario.
Let me facilitate your next retrospective.
What would you do if you were to take a facilitating stance? And again, people can call this out or put it in the chat.
What if I help you by facilitating your next retrospective?
It gets a little bit away from the core where the person wants something canceled. So to offer something certainly is helping, but I would say, what if you were to facilitate something for a group? So facilitation could be this. Should we check if others want the same? That's one way of looking at it.
So does this make sense for everybody so far? So as far as, you know, wearing the different stances, you know, as far as teaching and then facilitating?
On the facilitating, if you're getting that question from one person, he's likely got a bunch of people agreeing with him. So the answer from those people coming back would be none of them want the retrospective.
You're getting into a collective voice, which is a great thing. Some people are shy and some people are more vocal. And you're right, just because one person is raising this doesn't mean it is just exclusive to one. So what do we do? A lot of good comments coming in the chat as well. All right, let's look at another stance. If he were to be, well, miss the mentoring, but let's go with coaching. What might a coach say or ask?
What are your concerns?
That's a good open-ended question. One thing I would just caution here, when you take a coaching stance, and if you go for professional coach training, they like to avoid why. The why might seem to be a little threatening or intimidating in this area. We also avoid any questions that are direct that lead to a yes or a no. So you could still try to get to the essence of where this is coming from, but the suggestion here would be to avoid why and avoid the yes nos. So what Bob's got on the screen is just an example, but we see a good things in the chat. Hey, how do you do your retrospective? How will it help if you cancel it? What would you gain or lose?
And want to go do the last one, Nitin?
Yeah, click. We missed the mentoring, but let's go there. Now, if you were to offer that stance, what might you say or ask?
I ran into this situation in another team.
Oh, okay.
Dot.
Yep, there's something in the chat. Let me share something that worked for another team. That's just a story, a narrative. And again, with the caveat, what you would be sharing may or may not work for the immediate, but you have something that you can talk about. You can normalize the situation as well, or the stance or the scenario.
And it looks like our answer aligned with what we just heard.
Yeah.
And this is really interesting because I'm sure this has happened to you before. And if you're lucky enough to have a coach, to me, that when somebody on your team, says something like that, that means there's something wrong with the retrospective, because normally people like retrospectives because they're, trying to improve themselves. Is maybe, might ask the coach, hey, could you help facilitate the next retrospective? And that way, if you're the Scrum Master, you'd be able to learn, what that coach does. And also the coach would understand going into it that there's some negative vibes coming out of the retrospective. And that's where a coach could really help. And hopefully it would turn the whole attitude around with the team.
Yep. Let's try another one or see if you have another example.
Yes, there's select stances.
Yeah, this one I want to talk through. All right. So it could also be that when you face certain scenarios, certain stances that we spoke about do not apply or wouldn't make sense, right? Here, we have an executive who says, hey, I don't understand relative estimation, right? So if you take a teaching stance, you really just explain it. Hey, relative estimation is more of a comparison than a finite that we're accustomed to, or sometimes reverse engineer. Now, if you were to go to a facilitation stance, is there one? If we go to mentoring, is, hey, what I noticed with my prior teams again is, they didn't really understand relative estimations either. They were equating tasks with hours or story points with hours. And this happens, this is very common. And then you can actually jump into teaching stance after that. But what about a coaching stance? Here, we simply have someone seeking more information or knowledge. So in this example, we may not have those stances. So just wanted to call that as well. Right. Herein, we can also bring in other models like Shu, Ha, and Ri. If some of us are familiar with martial arts, when you are beginning, you are starting off, you might be just following your instructor, looking at all the moves. If you're doing karate, all the stances, or taekwondo, that's like, tell me what to do. That's the Shu, S-H-U. The Ha is when you start experimenting. Maybe you evolve with time, you go up in rank or bells, you might start sparring, and you're getting a feel of your opponent or opponents or the obstacles. And then the Ri is you become the rule. It's very spontaneous when you get into competitions, or God forbid, you're in an altercation of sorts, and you have to just pick everything you have from the past and everything you've learned over here. The Shu model is more of the teaching. The Ha could be mentoring, and the Ri, the coaching. And what weaves them together with the help of someone could be facilitation. So that's just another model out there. Let's see if we can do another one, Bob.
Oh, this is a you try.
Yeah.
So we have the 4 scenarios.
Yeah, so someone says, hey, can we have a 30-minute daily Scrum call? If you were to be teaching, what might you say, or how might you respond?
And that question's for the audience.
Yes.
Is there any brave people out there?
Yeah, the Braves are showing bravery on chat. So Scrum directs the Scrum calls to be limited to 15 minutes only.
Right.
So referring to the Scrum process would be the
Right.
teaching.
So Sunil could explain a time box, right? That's the concept. Hey, we're saying 15 minutes or less, not 15 minutes or more. So what's going on? You know, stay curious.
The other thing could be, is the team too large? I mean, if you can't do it in 15 minutes, maybe you've got 30 people that are trying to do a daily stand up.
Right. So the teaching stance was like, hey, you know, ideal scrummy teams for the guy, we're saying, you know, 9 to 11 people. Anything beyond that, it's just too big. Or are we saying, hey, do we have too many people on the call who are not really Scrum team members? They're just outsiders. Brian's also got a good comment. Remind them of the purpose of the daily Scrum. It's only got 3 points in it, right?
They may also be trying to go into too much detail and may need to have a separate meeting just to discuss whatever topic is, needs to be fleshed out.
Yeah, that probably would come in facilitating or coaching stance.
Right. Let's look at the facilitating stance next. If you were to facilitate something or respond that way, what might you say or ask?
Let me help you by facilitating your next meeting.
That could help.
Or just let me attend your next meeting and see how it goes, and I might be able to give you some advice on how to conduct these meetings and still finish in 15 minutes or less.
Yep, I'm seeing some comments that have jumped ahead. What could be done to keep the 15-minute time box? Might be a coaching stance after a few questions. And while they're good answers, I've got to even type over here. Can we meet with non-Scrum team members who show up?
I was just about to ask you, Bob, that is T intentional or should it be T?
Team.
It's a typo. You caught us.
Maybe after
Some
lean
people,
coffee, they
just
go
come
grab
in for
a cup
tea or
of tea.
coffee.
Paul's got a good one here. Would it be helpful to schedule a follow-up after the stand-up, right? That gives people an opportunity to debrief, talk, have more questions, see if there are anything beyond the 3 items that are being addressed.
And I know this is kind of off topic, but what I do a Scrum meeting with my team, the last person that goes, they say the daily Scrum's over. And in essence, what that does is it gives people permission to leave. And that way you meet your 15-minute time box, and then you could have those add-on discussions if people need to stay and have that.
Good call out. I always make it a point to call out that the daily Scrum is over, because then it's an open forum for people. If they want to stay, they can. Otherwise, we drop. And with new Scrum Masters coming into our organization, I make sure they call that out as well.
All right, we
All
still
right.
have mentoring and coaching.
Yeah, let's see what mentoring might look like.
You know, we tried that once before or in other situations, and this is how that worked out.
That's a story. That's a narrative. And you're explaining things. That's good.
That, you know, I guess our answer pretty much aligns with what was just said.
Right. So should we jump to the coaching stance then? What might a coach say or ask?
What's the agenda you want to cover in these 30-minute meetings?
Yep. What would we be covering? Shorter question and a lot of feedback. So Tom, when we say remind them of the 3 questions and the goal, that's more of a statement. The coaching stance will take more of the question.
Is everyone participating in the meeting able to say what they need to say in the time, in the 15-minute time?
Yep.
You might get a yes or a no answer out of that, though.
Yep. So I would rephrase that a little bit.
What do we accomplish in those 30 minutes?
Sorry, I missed that last one. The audio was a little choppy.
Yeah, I said, what do we accomplish in those extra 15 minutes?
That's a good one. You're churning.
So Nitin, and I hope you've gotten a better understanding now of the different stances that are involved. And me personally, this is why I really enjoy working in this space, because as you could see, it's, you know, if you're doing your job right, you know, as you grow your skills from facilitation to mentoring, teaching, and coaching, you could really see how you can really have a major impact on your team by basically just looking at the situation and having the team learn.
Yep. A good coach will be able to not only do this dance, but be able to make the distinction and then also recognize this in others as well. So what do we have next, Bob? So what does a professional coach do? So forget agility for a moment, right? We hear of life coaches as well. And it's quite simply taking a neutral stance of the client's agenda. You're not really trying to sway someone in a certain way, and that can be hard. You want to certainly stay present, no distractions, you want to focus on the topic at hand, the concern at hand, be a good listener, talk less, listen more. Unfold and reveal. And that's again what we're seeing through the chat and all the questions that are coming up and bubbling up. And just reflect and keep reflecting And then hopefully when people reach that state of awareness, then they will hopefully one day become the rule or the norm and not really need you, as odd as that might sound. So what do we have next, Bob? Yep, again, as I said, you want to be able to dance between these and also be able to call out these competencies.
And also, when you're working with a coach, they'll come in with the coaching stance and, they'll be asking the questions, but you as their customer or their client can come back, can take a step back and say, hey, I really need help with this. Can you help facilitate this meeting? Can you mentor me? Sometimes a coach might just be waiting to be asked because they don't want to come on too strong. Like I've experienced that firsthand a lot of times. And then sometimes executives, when they hire a coach, they're expecting a consultant. They're expecting the person to come in and tell them, you do this, this, and this, give them all the answers. So it's really, you're their client. So you're the one that can actually provide that guidance. If you don't, they might just take the coaching stance by asking those powerful questions that we went through.
If you're in a position to interview people, this is going to be an interesting model. I'm not sure or saying that you have to do this, but listen carefully when potential coaches are answering. Are they doing the dance? Are they responding in a certain way? Are they more of a teacher? Are they more of a mentor? Or do they blend in all of these things? Right. And one other thing is, sometimes the Agile coach certainly is an outsider of the core Scrum team. Okay, let's move on ahead. Other models, StrengthsFinder is something I've spoken about quite a bit. This is by the late Dr. Clifton and Tom Rudd. And this is just a quick psychological assessment based on your strengths. A lot of times people say, hey, where are you challenged? What are your weaknesses in an interview? But if we flip the coin of everything that we've been conditioned to, what if we focus on where we thrive and really do well? And that's the identification of your strengths. And the StrengthsFinder model has got over 4 decades of research behind it. And we'll show you a very quick example of this in the next slide. Over here, I was working with one Agile team, 6 members, and we just asked them a series of questions. This was a 20-minute assessment you can do online, and it's based on preferentials. So, hey, would you rather read a book or would you rather go for a movie? No right or wrong answers over there. That's all it is. Given the collection of how they answer and the data points, we get 4 broad categories. People having strengths in execution, influencing, relationship building, and strategic thinking. Within all those 4, you can get a little bit more granular, and all of these have deeper meanings and interpretations, which we can just get off the StrengthsFinder book. So for example, under influencing, we have some interesting names. You've got an activator, command, communication, competition, and so on. And under strategic thinking, you've got analytical, context, futuristic, and so on. On the left, you have the 6 team members. And if you start looking left to right, their top strengths will show. So for team member 1, they're a super achiever. They're very good at executing. Thereafter, if you look, they get into strategic thinking, then relationship building with 3 and 4, and then go back into strategic thinking under input. If you notice, they don't really have many strengths under influencing, which is like the orange highlighted area. Team member 2, in comparison, It's got about 3 strengths under influencing. Number 3 is activator. Number 1, which is their primary strength, is command. And number 5 is communication. The other 2 are in the strategic thinking grid. So this gives a very quick visual and a snapshot of people's strengths and this team. Now, if you go to the next slide, I asked a question: what would happen if team member 2 hit the lottery or just went on vacation? And compared this to the collective entire team of all the 6 members. And it's an open question. Some of you may have seen this before when I presented it with PMI, but any observations without being super experts or even familiar with it? What could we say?
I'd say team member 2 can't go on vacation.
And why would that be, Bob? What would happen if this person just decided to, hey, go to Florida or some other nice warm place for 2 weeks?
Well, as long as there's no budget at stake or the team doesn't need something, I think that's, those are the kinds of things that come to my mind.
And anybody can feel free to put this in the chat as well. But here's the observation. If you look at the influencing bucket or grid, team member 2 is the only person there who has strong skills in influencing. So negotiation, charm, trade-offs. This person had traditional business analysis skills and was a BA. So they were always going back and forth with the requirements, what's more important, what could be due maybe in a couple of weeks or a couple of months, maybe at a more granular level at the sprints. And the other team members actually agreed this person would be really valuable in that regard. It's not that other people cannot do it, but they thrive in this area. So what ended up happening is they said, hey, we need to find someone else when our team grows to have a few of these traits. And that is something that actually is going to help the team when this person is away. And that was very enlightening. This is something that an Agile coach can bring into your organization. I was fortunate that the organization I was working with, their HR was actually familiar with this model and used it amongst themselves. So the rolling it out was actually very easy once I got the go-ahead from people. So peeking into the chat, yeah, look at or think about knowledge transfer.
So when it comes to the yearly appraisals, you want people like team member number 2 to be batting for you.
That could be another thing. So yeah, something in the chat. Yeah, the knowledge transfer is secondary here. This is more on the strengths. But yeah, if that person is off, we need more of the influencing, the negotiation, the trade-offs, and other things. And in this model, again, there's really no teaching, facilitating, or mentoring. It's just bringing awareness to people's personalities, their styles, their strengths, both at an individual level as well as a collective group. So I've seen some fascinating results with that one.
Yeah, Nitin, it's Larry. Just a slightly different reminder or caution maybe,
Sure.
is that person also there's a real potential when you're the only one to be ostracized by the others in the group, depending on personalities and situation. So as a coach,
Right.
sometimes the thing to look for is to protect those people that have the less popular view, because all of those analytical, or pick one, all those strategic thinkers love to talk about strategic thinking, but may not necessarily care too much about somebody telling them what to do. So it can
Right.
work well, but needs to be protected.
Yeah, but I don't think it is the coach's responsibility to protect any of the team members. It is coach's responsibility certainly to coach the people, to the whole team, to be able to find out the or appreciate the strengths of such people and uh, be able to work as a cohesive team.
I hear that, Sunil, and I think again, it's just a watch out as far as I'm concerned, that
Yeah.
we want to try to help the team become aware of potential dysfunction. We don't have to protect people, but we might want to point out that somebody who's a minority view or doesn't have the same strengths as everyone else,
Right.
and what that might mean to the team and how it operates.
Right. Right. I think that's a good observation. And I think one of the benefits of StrengthsFinder is you can kind of turn the narrative around or help people understand, hey, while this person is in a bit of a like a minority of sorts, they really have strengths in this area. So when the opportunity arises, when the situation arises, maybe we can leverage this person's help and assistance here, you know, change it around, right? And again, I say while there are two sides of a coin, there are many sides of a pyramid. And not everybody looks at things the same way. And therein also lies in the richness in humanity and the range of emotions and the things we can come together with the collective intellect of a group becoming one strong team. So I can keep on and on philosophically, but again, that was very good feedback. So again, for this model, there wasn't anything specific in agility. You could use it at home if you're ever coaching a baseball league and so on. People love taking it outside of the workplace, but certainly I weaved it into an agile team. So what next, Bob?
And I just wanted to add that if you, if you want to do this, if you buy the book, you get you get free access, so you can take the survey. Also, I found that if you buy the Audible book, it's cheaper than the hard copy book, and you also get access to the survey. So it's just something to think about.
Sure. So does one size fit all? No, not really. And we kept it simple with just that image of the little child in the overgrown thing. So to wrap it up, we can find a few different competencies between a Scrum Master and an Agile coach. Every organization has different needs, depending on their journey, where they are, their evolution. The culture plays an impact or has an impact, excuse me. And there really isn't a one size fits all. So if you are curious about actual professional coaching, one of my recommendations is to explore something called ORSC, Organization and Relationship Systems Coaching. We get very familiar with the teaching, the mentoring, the facilitation stance, but if you truly want to get into coaching and have that toolkit of powerful questions, staying present with the person in front of you, ORSC talks more about a pair or a group or working with them. And it intentionally avoids one-on-one coaching because they talk about and reveal what's called the third entity. There's a certain dynamic that comes about when you put two people in a room and they're talking, and that is recognized as the third entity. This also works well with families as well. So professional coaches, again, this is just an agile group, but they also work as life coaches with families and family dynamics. So if you're thinking about sharpening your saw and your skill sets and coaching, this is one entity out there that you could explore. Okay, so in wrapping up, we like feedback. If you were in the room, we would ask you to do a fist of 5, but certainly you could use the chat here. How about the chat of 5? If you're very happy with this, put in a 5. If it's a neutral stance, it was a 3. If it's a 1, that means, you didn't really get what you were looking for. And we can just see where we landed.